Good evening, everyone. Happy Monday. I am looking forward to working with you again this week. Hopefully, you all had a great weekend. That you were able to get some good practice, get your homework done, and that you're ready to roll this week. This week's going to be a lot of fun. Today's going to be a little bit easier than some of these past few days have been. A lot easier than optionals and probably easier than conditions and functions and whatnot, but still important because today we're going to be talking about strings, which, strings we've already used a ton up to this point, and you'll use them a ton as you move forward and as you continue learning how to code. So I hope you guys have been able to keep up with class and with the things that we've been learning. Have there been any specific questions or concerns that have come up as you guys have been reviewing the content, or even anything that we talked about last week? Okay, looks like the video from last Thursday was not posted. Let me figure out why not. Let's see here. Alrighty, I'll keep you posted on that, and hopefully we can get that put on soon. Luckily today, we'll only briefly touch on what we talked about last week. Okay, somebody else asked a question about the Fibonacci sequence. That's a great question. It's a great challenge as well. So the Fibonacci sequence, again, is essentially a way to count, and the sequence takes like the previous two numbers and adds them together, and that's the next number in the sequence, right? So it would be, oh my goodness, let's see. I want to make sure I start it right. So if you start at 0, sequence. I guess if you start at 1, right? So it'll be 1, 1, and then 1 plus 1 equals 2, 2 plus 1 equals 3, 3 plus 2 is equal to 5, 5 plus 3 equals 8, 8 plus 5 equals 13, right? So in order to get the next value in your sequence, you take the sum of the previous two numbers. Okay, and I can't explain exactly how to do the Fibonacci sequence here on this recording, because then that would ruin it for some of the other students that will be coming through. But if you want to Slack me what you already have or any specific questions, I'd be happy to help out a little bit later, okay? What else? Housekeeping stuff. So this is the last week of this iOS, or this Intro to iOS course. And so if you feel like this is something that you do want to be doing, make sure that you enroll for the full-time course that will be starting soon. And yeah, I think that's about all that we have today. So we'll just be meeting up till Thursday this week. Thursday is our last day of class, normal times. And yeah, so let's talk about last week. We covered the basics of iOS and of Swift. We talked about conditionals and optionals, and we also talked about loops and functions. Okay, so that's what we did the 4 days last week. So if you haven't seen any of those videos, make sure to go and watch them, so that you can be caught up for the rest of class, especially tomorrow and Wednesday and Thursday. We're going to be building a lot upon those things that we learned last week. So if you haven't watched them, go back and watch them. I just heard back from one of my colleagues who posts the nightly videos, and he thought he had posted it, but looks like it didn't come up there, so he is posting it right now if you need to watch Thursday's class, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and let's start talking about strings. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you here. And like we do every class, we are going to get started with a Swift playground, okay? So go ahead and open up Xcode, and you're going to be creating a new playground, okay? And let's go ahead and call this strings, okay? And I'm just going to put it on my desktop here. And then, as always, I need to change my theme so it's a little bit easier to see. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to talk about strings today. You've already worked with strings a ton, but you can think of strings as text in your application, right? And strings are usually created by text surrounded in double quotes, okay? So when we started up the Swift Playground, you'll see that it actually gives us a string, hello playground. Okay, so we're going to be talking about strings today, how to combine strings, how to identify characters within a string, and then to create functions that use kind of those identifying tools that we have, okay? So let's go ahead and let's talk about first something that is called a string literal, okay? So string literals are what we've already done plenty of times in this class. So the way that you can create a string literal is by creating a property and then putting text in between double quotes, okay? So this is called a string literal, or text that you are putting right into your application, that you are hard coding into your application, okay? So variable name equals Johnny, okay? So let's talk about when we want to create a longer string, okay? So obviously it's pretty easy when it's just one word. If we print out that variable, so print name here, and you'll see that it's just Johnny, okay? But what if we want to have more text? What if we want to indent and add paragraphs? That can be really hard to do with just these string literals, right? So let's say, for example, that I want to say variable Little Red Riding Hood. Okay, and then we want to say once upon a time there was a girl named Little Red Riding Hood. Okay, and then let's say that I want to push enter and to start a new paragraph. Well, if we do that, you'll see that we get a bunch of errors, okay? And that's because when you're creating a string literal, you can't actually format, you can't format your string like you would a Word document or a Pages document, right? And so what you can do instead to create something longer, multi-word, I'm going to turn off these notifications here really quick because they are annoying. Not disturb. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so what we can do is we can create what's called a multi-line string literal, okay? And the way that we do that is here where we're creating our property, instead of starting with one double quote, we're going to start with 3, okay? And these 3 double quotes need to be on the exact same line as your declaration of your property. And sorry, just reading a chat. Somebody thought somebody wants to see the shared content and not my camera. I'll make that easy for all of you and stop my video. I actually don't really like sharing my video anyway. Okay, so And this is going to be, our property is going to be Little Red Riding Hood is equal to, and then we're going to do triple double quotes. Okay, and then we're also going to want to end with triple double quotes. Okay, and then anything that you want to be in your string here will be in between these triple double quotes. Okay, so now I can go ahead and I can say, once upon a time, there was a little girl named I don't know why I keep saying Goldilocks. Little Red Riding Hood. One day she went to her grandma's house. Okay. So you can see that if I were to print this out, I would expect to see a line and then a new line and then a line again, right? A new line that has nothing in it and then another line with this next paragraph, okay? So let's go ahead and we will print out our variable Little Red Riding Hood. And you'll see now that we've got our multi-line string literal here, okay? So it's important to remember that the first set of triple double quotes needs to be on the same line as your property declaration. And then your ending triple double quotes need to be on a new line by themselves at the very end, okay? And then everything in between the two will be included in your multi-line string literal, okay? So let's talk now about how we can combine strings, okay? And we can combine strings by using something called string concatenation, okay? And string concatenation is a really, really simple way to combine strings. It's not as powerful as some other ways, but a really simple way to do so. So let's say, for example, that I have a variable or a constant. Let's do constant because we're going to say my first name is equal to Johnny, okay? And then let's let my last name equal Hicks. Okay, and then to do string concatenation, what we can do is we can say we want our first name, and we want to add, and we would like to add a space in between, right? Because if I just do first name plus last name, and then print out full name, you'll see down here that we get Johnny Hicks without any spaces, okay? So when we're using string concatenation, it's literally just taking one string and adding the next string right after without any other characters added, okay? So when we're doing string concatenation, we need to make sure that we add all of the characters that we'll be needing. So in this case, I want to put a space in between all of those and then add my last name, okay? And so we can actually add string literals into this property with string concatenation. You know, I could go here and I could say plus nice to meet you, okay? So, and again, we'd either have to put add a space, or we can just put a space in my actual string literal to add a space there as well, okay? So that is string concatenation in a nutshell of how to combine two different strings. And it's important to note that if I wanted to say, like let's say a score, right? So let score string equal we scored, and then we'd want to add a number, right? So we scored, and then let score equal 6, okay? And then let combined string equals score string plus score, okay? Well, let's see what happens when we do this. See that we get an error saying that you cannot add a string and an integer together, okay? So that's something important to remember with string concatenation, is that you have to be combining two strings. So if I go ahead and I wrap this 6 in double quotes, which forces it to be a string, right? Or changes its type to a string, then we can see that our combined string says we scored 6. Okay? So string concatenation only to be used when adding two strings together. Okay? So next I want to talk a little bit about characters. Okay? Characters. Okay? So every string that we create is made up of a number of characters, right? So we have vowels, we have consonants, we've got spaces, we've got new lines, we've got tabs. Those are all characters within a string. And the compiler in Swift is really powerful and can actually go through each of the characters in a given string. So let me show you an example here. So let's say we've got let string equal hello. Okay. And so now if I want to loop through and print out each letter in this string, I can do that by using character. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's do for, and then remember with our for in loops, we can just put whatever we want here as our property name. Okay, I'm just gonna, to make it easy, we're gonna do for character in string print character. Okay, and let's go ahead and then you'll see here in our console that we've got hello. Okay, so it's going through our string. It's looking at the first character and then it's going to print out that character. Okay, and then it's going to loop back around and it's going to print out the next character. Okay, so this is really awesome to be able to loop through all these characters because it can help us create some powerful functions. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's write one of these functions using this character property on our strings. Okay, so I want to create a function that loops through a given string and tells me how many times a certain letter is repeated in said string. Okay, so let's think about that for a second. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to name this function give me the count. Okay, and remember I want to see how many of a certain letter is in a string. Okay, so we're going to have two different parameters here. Let's go ahead and let's call our first parameter our phrase, and it's going to be of type string. And then I want to see how many times a certain letter or character appears in that string. Okay, so we're going to have another parameter that's going to be of type character. Okay, and then I know that I'm going to want to return a count, right? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to return an integer for that. Okay, and then we'll get this error that says, hey, you're missing a return in your function. Okay, but we'll get to that. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's create a property in here. We need to create a property that's going to store our count, right? So let's go ahead and say variable letter count of type int is equal to 0. Okay, because it's always going to start at 0. All right, and then we know that our letter count is going to be what we want to return. So let's go ahead and at the end of our function, let's go ahead and return letter count to get rid of this error here. Okay, so right now if we were to call this function, we would get 0, right? Because we haven't done anything with our letter count yet. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to create a for loop here. And we want to say for character in phrase. Okay, so for character in our phrase that we're passing in as one of the parameters, we want to do a conditional, right? If our character that we're calling in our for loop is equal to our letter parameter, then we want to take our letter count and add 1 to its value, right? Plus equals 1. Okay, get rid of these blank lines here. And now we should be able to use our function. Okay, so I'm going to say give me the count And let's do, hello, my name is Johnny, and I like to write code. Okay. And let's go ahead and let's pick a letter. So in this case, let's go ahead and say, let's look at the letter A. Okay. This probably needs to be wrapped in double quotes here. Okay. Alrighty. So then we can go ahead and we're returning our letter count. So I'm going to create another property here that will print out our letter count, right? So property, let's do let count equal give me the count. And then again, we want to do hello, my name is Johnny and I like to write code looking for the letter A. Okay, and we're going to print out our count. Okay, so we'll give that a second to catch up, and we can see here in our console that the letter A is in there 2 times. Okay, so let's try another one. Let's look at the letter N. Okay, we'll run our code, and we can see that N is in our phrase 4 times. All right, let's do one more, and let's do the letter H. And it says that we have one letter H. Now, if I look at my code, looks like there's an H in hello, and then there's an H in Johnny. Okay, so something's missing. So with characters are going to be case sensitive, right? So a capital H is not equal to a lowercase h. And so in the case of our function here, we're saying, hey, show me all of the lowercase h's, okay? So what we can do to update our function here to make sure that it gives us all instances of a character, despite whether it's uppercase or lowercase, is we can use something that Apple has built into strings. And it's a function called, or it's a method, sorry, it's a method called uppercase or lowercase, okay, or lowercase. Either one is totally fine. But you can see here that lowercase returns a lowercase version of the string, okay? And so this is a nifty little method that Apple has built into string types that will essentially go through your string and look for anything that is uppercase, and if it's uppercase, it will lowercase it, okay? And then if you do the uppercase method, it will do the opposite, right? But these are really powerful methods because it helps us avoid this mistake of having like a capital H and a lowercase h. If we just go ahead and make everything the same case, then we won't have any issues finding all of the h's or finding all of the n's, okay? So now, if we go ahead and run this, print out our count here. What am I missing? Give me the count. Oh, it's because I'm doing uppercase, and so I passed in a lowercase, which there are 0 lowercase h's, okay? So make sure that you're searching with an uppercase, an uppercase character, okay? So then we can see that we have 2 h's in our phrase here. Okay, any questions on how I got to this point? Or questions about strings or characters or loops or conditionals? Cool. Okay, let's go ahead and let's clear this out. And again, I did say that today is going to be a little bit simpler. And because of that, we're actually probably going to end a little early today, which means that you guys can get started on your homework early. And then remember, when you do your homework, you need to fill out your daily stand-up form, and I'll be posting a link for that as soon as we're done. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and let's talk about another way to combine strings. And this is the more powerful way to do so, rather than string concatenation. It's actually called string interpolation. String interpolation. Okay, and so let's go ahead and let's say that we want to print out a string that tells us how many cows a farmer has. Okay, so we're going to create a property here, and let's call it let number of cows be equal to 713. And let farmer string equal the farmer has. Okay, and so with the example I was giving before, remember I wanted to include an integer right in my string. String interpolation will allow us to do that. And the way that we do this is by doing backslash, and then we can actually pass in a property that we've created, and then say cows here. The farmer has, and then pass in using a backslash, and then the name of my property in parentheses, and then finishing up our string, right? So you can think of interpolation as inserting another property into our string, okay? So now, if I go ahead and print out number of cows, no, not our number of cows, our farmer string, my apologies, that we will see the farmer has 713 cows, okay? So that's an example of string interpolation, okay? So let's do another example of the string interpolation. And let's say, I'm a big basketball fan. Let's go ahead and say let Warriors score is equal to 99, and let Lakers score equal 98, okay? And now we can say let score string equal the Warriors scored, and then forward or backslash, and then we're going to put our Warriors score property in there, points, comma, and the Lakers scored. And then we want to do our Lakers score property here, points. Okay, and then let's go ahead and let's print out our score string. Print score string, and you'll see the Warriors scored 99 points and the Lakers scored 98 points. Okay, so there's another example of string interpolation, which this is actually used a lot more than string concatenation. So I would get really good practice at using at passing in these properties here. Okay, so let's do another example here. Okay, let's say that I'm creating a game, and I want the game to return a string that tells me how many lives I have left. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's create a property. This is going to be a variable because it's our number of lives, which we can lose lives, right? Let's say that our character in our game starts with 5 lives, okay? So now I want to create a function that tells me how many lives I have, right? So let's go ahead and create a function. We'll call this how much life, and we're going to be passing in a lives property, right? And let's do this. We'll say let string equal you have forward slash or backslash you have, and then we're going to be passing our lives parameter in, lives left. Okay, but I also want my game, if I don't have any lives left, I want it to print out game over, right? So I've got this initial string here. And so let's take a condition. Let's say if the number of lives that I pass in is greater than 0, then we want to go ahead and print out my string, okay? else, so if my lives is less than 0, print game over. Okay, so now we've got a function that tells us how much life our character has, right? So let's go ahead and I'm going to call how much lives, and we're going to be passing in our number of lives. Okay, and we should see if this runs, you have 5 lives left. Okay, now we could call this function multiple times, and it would always say you have 5 lives left, right? So we also need to decrease the number of lives, right? So let's create another function here. And I'm going to say func, and we're going to call this lose life. Okay, so this is the function that we're going to call when our character gets hit or when we lose a life. Okay, so when we lose a life, we know that our number of lives is going to decrease by 1. Okay, and then so that I don't have to call lots of different functions, I'm actually going to call how much life here and pass in my number of lives as the parameter, so that now I can just write one function, but it will do everything that I need it to, okay? And so this is an example of the powers of functions, right? Is that we can create functions and then we can call functions within functions to decrease the amount of code that we have, right? So now if I go down here and I call lose life, we'll let the code run, I have 4 lives left, okay? Lose life, you have 3 lives left, okay? Lose life, you have 2 lives left, right? And so when I'm calling lose life, it's decreasing number of lives by 1, and then calling my how much life function, which is generating a string, and it's taking the number of lives that we're passing in and generating that string, or we're going to print game over, right? So let's call this a couple more times, lose life and lose life. And we'll see as soon as we are down to 0 lives, it prints out game over. Okay. So hopefully that's a good kind of a good intro to using functions and using string interpolation in your functions. Okay. Now let's talk about something called escape characters. Escape characters. Now, I talked a little bit about multi-line string literals, right? But what if I don't want to use multi-line string literals and I want everything to be included in a string literal, including new lines, okay? That's where these escape characters come into play. All right, and so a couple of the escape characters that we use that are very common in Swift are going to be \n, okay, \t, then we actually have \\, we've got \double quote, and \single quote, okay? And these are all separate, right? This isn't just one escape character. These are all different characters, okay? And so let's talk about each of these. So if we want to create a property, so let name, and I want to print out my name on 2 different lines, go ahead and say let name equal, we're going to do Johnny, okay? And if I do this, if I just say Johnny Hicks, right, this is all going to be on the same line. Print out my name here, and we see Johnny Hicks, okay? So an escape character that we can use to go to a new line is this \n. Okay, so this is the first escape character that we're going to learn, and this essentially creates a new line. Okay, so if I do Johnny \n Hicks, this \n is saying new line, and then go ahead and complete the string, right? So if I wanted to do my middle name as well, so if we did, or my middle initial, we'll go ahead and do my middle initial, put D here, and we can see Johnny D. Hicks, okay? So So that's the first escape character. You're going to be using that pretty frequently, this \n. That's going to allow you to create new lines. Okay, so this next one that we have here is \t. Okay, and the T stands for tab. Okay, so if we're formatting a paragraph, so let me find just like a good paragraph example. Okay, simple paragraph, so that I don't have to type all of this, right? Okay, so let's say I've got a string here. It's actually about paragraphs. Okay, you'll see here that a paragraph is a group of words put together to form a group, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so if I put a \t here and run the code, you'll see that it doesn't print out \t, but instead adds an indentation here. Okay, so then I could go ahead and I could put a \n here to put that on a new line. Paragraphs can be, oh yeah, so you can see our new line here, paragraphs can begin with an indentation. Okay, so those are our escape characters, and again, escape character means it won't be printed out with the string, but they're used more for formatting. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's look at one of these other ones. So let's say my favorite quote is, and then you can see here, if we try to do a double quote, it gets confused and it's saying, hey, a string needs to be wrapped with just 2 double quotes, okay? So what we can do to avoid that is use an escape character double quote, okay? So my favorite quote is, and then we can say, Veni, Vedi, Vici, okay? I came, I saw, I conquered, okay? And then we'll add another escape character to finish off my quote. And now we can see here in our console, my favorite quote is Veni, Vedi, Vici, surrounded in double quotes, okay? So yeah, so using that, that / and then a character is what you can do to add some of these special characters into our string, right? And so again, this is the same if I do / single quote, and it prints out, it will wrap my quote in single quotes. Okay, and then this example is just if you ever need to include a \. So I could go ahead and I could do \, and because \ is an escape character, in order to put a \ actually into your string literal, you need to preface it with a \ itself, right? So we can do \, Veni, Vedi, Vici, surrounded in \. Okay, so that is an example of escape characters. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to give you a quick challenge and then we'll actually be done for the day. Okay, and let me pull your challenge up here. Okay, so I want you to create a function that prints out a formula for multiplying, okay? And this is going to be for multiplying 2 numbers. Okay, so this function, I'm not going to give you any more details, but this function, the output should be something like this. 4 times 5 equals 20. Okay, so I want you to create a function that takes 2 numbers and returns a string that gives us the formula. Okay, the formula that you've put in. So 4 times 5 equals 20. Okay, so go ahead and I'm going to give you 3 minutes to write this function. Okay, and let me know if you have any questions. Alrighty, let's go ahead and let's run through it together. Okay, so let's go ahead and say, let's call this function. It's a good name for this. Let's do print. Let's do print formula for multiplying. Okay. So we know that we're going to have two parameters, right? Because we're going to be multiplying two numbers. So we can go ahead and we can say A as our first parameter and B as our second parameter. And those are both going to be of type int, right? And let's go ahead and open up our function here. And here's what we want to do. It's pretty simple. We're just simply going to print, and then we are going to use some string interpolation and pass in our A, right? So we know that A times \b equals, okay? And then inside of our parentheses here, we can actually use some arithmetic, right? And insert that right into our string. So I'll go ahead and do A times B, okay? And so let's go ahead and let's call our function here, print formula for multiplying, and let's take 5 and 6, and we'll see that 5 times 6 is equal to 30, okay, or equals 30. Okay, so that is all that we have today for strings. I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys may have. You guys have been pretty quiet, so I'm assuming that, that you're feeling pretty good about this stuff. I just posted the links to your homework and to your daily stand-up form for you to fill out as soon as you're done with your homework. And then make sure that you are back here in about an hour, and one of the PMs will post a new link for a Zoom so that you guys can get into your small groups, okay? So again, that's what we have for today. Tomorrow we will be talking about collections, so arrays and dictionaries, which are a lot of fun and used a ton. I use arrays for almost everything. So make sure that you're here tomorrow at the same time. Make sure you get your homework done and your stand-up form done, and we'll go ahead and move forward with those things. Okay, guys? You guys have a great night, and let me know if you have any questions or concerns. See you guys later.